Arash ikinci kere bize katılıyor. Geçen sene de Everyday Rebellion gösterdik ve burada bir masterclass düzenledik onunla birlikte. Bu sefer yine heyecan verici bir konuyla birlikteyiz. Masterclasslar ve sinema dersleri ve ardından paneller devam edecek ayın 16'sına kadar. Sizleri bekliyoruz. Görüşmek üzere. Güzel festivaller.
Welcome, abis and sisters. I don't know the word.
Abla.
Abla. Yeah, I'm happy to be here again, and I would like to talk today about different forms of representation of reality in documentary filmmaking. Was any of you last year here at the masterclass about Everyday Rebellion, so that I know what I have to maybe repeat or not? Was anyone here last year? One. Okay, good. Then no problem. Maybe you hear something again. Okay, great. So, I will, this will be like a more very open form. You can ask me whatever you have for questions about if you're yourself filmmakers. Are you filmmakers? Do you have anything to do with thinking about documentary and different forms of reality? Yeah, okay, great.
Too early now.
Too early in the morning, yeah. I will sip my coffee, toast on you. So, the question is, what is a documentary? And this is a question that is, the film history is thinking about it and discussing it, and theoretical issues have been written about it and so on. And we still cannot answer this question, because especially in our days where we have so many scripted realities and different versions of you know, like taking real people, making fictionalized stuff with them, we don't know where the borders are. And that's why I wanted to go through different ways of thinking of it. Like, one problem that we have when we want to make documentary films, or when you work with people who want to make a film, is the fact that sorry, that they think that it's not possible to write a documentary. But the reality is, and the main reason is that people think that it's not possible to write a screenplay for a documentary or a document, because if you go out and shoot, then the things will happen and you capture it. But our problem nowadays is, like, when you produce documentaries, you need to sell your film on paper before you can make it, which is sometimes very difficult for us filmmakers, because we are filmmakers, we work with images and not with paper. But we have to learn it, and it's very possible, very much possible to predict a lot of things. And this is, of course, a question of research. I will come back to that later, but let's talk a little bit about what is reality and what different forms of reality we can see. So, John Grierson, a classical figure in film history, said it's a creative treatment of actuality, which says it all in a way. Because it is different. Creative treatment of reality is different than just holding the camera on something and thinking that is the reality. Because we all know, from the point we move the camera towards a direction, we don't see the other direction, and we are choosing a part of the reality. Of course, when you shoot a lot of material, you have to think how to deal with that creative form, creative treatment. How how to react on that reality, and this is a big question in the editing and in the ethics of documentary filmmaking, because as you might know, there are different schools of documentary films, and we can go through them quickly for those of you who were not maybe aware of it. And the level of your interpretation and your changing of the reality is something that sometimes is seen as not morally responsible. I think this is something that you have to decide yourself. With morally responsible, I mean if you shoot something and then you put it in a different order than it happened in real time, then you have a moral responsibility to decide, is this okay, the way I edit this? And there is a very good example. I think it was Hedy Honigman, great Dutch director, who did a film about, I think it was about the Serbian war and some mass killing that had been happened. And she was shooting one person who was a witness of that mass killings, and he went into a cemetery and explained, that was the idea. She told him, can you go into the cemetery and explain me what happened? The guy went into that, explained everything, what happened there and the graves and everything. The whole sequence was about 30 minutes, 25-30 minutes shooting. Hedy Honigman knew that she has in the film only 5 or 7 minutes time for that. So she asked the guy, is it possible that you concentrate more on these parts and you do it again? Because she said, I can edit it. I can edit it to 5 minutes, it's possible. But can you do it? And the guy said, yeah, no problem. And he did it again, and it was, let's say, 12-13 minutes. And then she still knew that she has only 5 or 7 minutes, and she did it one more time. And then the guy did it in 7 minutes or something. And she didn't have to cut it a lot. So this is, I think, a very interesting example of, is this real, or is this interfering too much in the reality of the guy? And I think this is morally absolutely okay, because she didn't change the word of the guy. She let him do his way of shortage and not the way of an editor and director. And this, for me, is a more authentic or real way, because editing is, of course, the biggest manipulation that we can have. And if we let someone redo things in reality, I think this is something that you should not be afraid of, as long as you don't change the reality of the person, as long as it's in the hand of that person. If we go through other explanations of former time, let's do the bigger one. We have an explanation from 1985, films that have no control about the film they went. So in this, if you look at this explanation, the example that I gave you is not a documentary. Because the person, the director, controlled the reality and told the guy to do it again and again. And if you look at it, like reproductions versus representations, then it's also a question, is this a documentary or not? Because reproduction is in a way fiction. You reproduce a reality that maybe happened, or you invent it. And this example that I brought you is also kind of a reproduction of of a story again and again through the same guy. But you can also say that it's a representation, because he is representing his own view and not the editor editing the story in the view of the editor or director. So here we already see difficulties in the explanation of what is this, what is a documentary, what is a representation. And another example, documentaries are not documents in the strict sense of the word, but they are based on the document-like quality of elements within them. This is, if you look at it, it's documents in the sense of word are paper, are stuff, it's like archive, it's the birth certificate of someone. This is, of course, filming a document is not a documentary. Shit, I thought I turned it off. Sorry, I'll just turn this off. So documentaries are based on document-like quality of elements, and that's this quality, document-like quality of elements are elements of authenticity, elements that are used also in fiction films and in other places in order to pretend that something has a document-like quality. So if in former times when you watched news or whatever and then some amateur filmmaker shot an event on the street, it was written amateur films and it was shaky and grainy and the quality was bad. Nowadays, of course, with mobile phone, and if we would have news with perfect shots of, you know, like very good quality, which would be possible nowadays with the cameras and so on, then we would not believe sometimes this reality, because we are not used to it. The authenticity signals that documentary material give us are different, or we think they have to be different. Let's watch a little scene that is dealing with this, about the film that is dealing with all these elements of reality and not. One of the few documentaries of the great Orson Welles, maybe you know the film, it's called F for Fake. No? Where is it? Here. If you look at it, maybe you can think about these different versions of reality, what we were talking.
For my next experiment, ladies and gentlemen, I would appreciate the loan of any small personal object from your pocket. A key, a box of matches, a coin. Key it is. Good, sir. Hold it up 10 feet over your head and watch out for the slightest hint of hanky-panky. And behold, before our very eyes, a transformation. We've changed your key into a coin. What happened to the key? It's been returned to you. Look closely, sir. You'll find the key back in your pocket. May we see it, please?
After your old tricks, I see.
Why not? I'm a charlatan. What's that, sir? Did I used to be a magician? Sir, I'm still working on it. As for the key, it was not symbolic of anything. This isn't that kind of movie. You'll find the coin now in your pocket, sir. Keep your eyes on that coin, sir, while it's returned to you as your key. Should we return you to your mother? Is this your mother? No, of course not. Open your mouth wide. return you your money. By the way, have you ever heard of Robert Houdin? Speaking of magicians, I mean. Of course not. But of course you do know my partner, Francois Reichenbach.
Hello.
Houdin was the greatest magician who ever lived. Do you know what he said? A magician, he said, is just an actor.
Well, good luck to you.
Just an actor, playing the part of a magician.
Very nice.
And she's fabulously rich, too. It's a good story about it.
Do you want to tell it?
We'll come to that one later. Now it's time for an introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, by way of introduction, this is a film about trickery, fraud, about lies. Tell it by the fireside or in a marketplace or in a movie. Almost any story is almost certainly some kind of lie. But not this time. This is a promise. During the next hour, everything you'll hear from us is really true and based on solid facts.
Don't talk about Napoleon or Julius Caesar. You're talking about Elmire.
Elmire?
Elmire?
Who is Elmire? That question has yet to be answered with any real precision.
Can I kiss you too? Anybody wants to eat?
In the world of the jet-setters among us beautiful people, everybody knows Elmire. But Elmire what?
He has about 60 times the same name.
Dihori?
He's called his name Ori, Uri, Bori, Suri, Kori, Vari, Dori, all the... With U-R-Y, 60 names.
His real name was Elmire Ferenc Huffman.
Then 60...
Okay, we could watch it the whole time, I know. But I think this is a great example of how he plays. Sorry, microphone. This is a great example how he plays with the different realities of a documentary and also filmmaking. And documentaries are not more different than fiction films. They are a representation, a reconstruction, most of the times, of real events, and it's about the magic of filmmaking. And when you remember, he said, this time not, this time everything is real, everything that you will hear in the next hour is real, and it's not fiction. The great thing is, you watch the film, and it's very fascinating about this guy who fakes art, and the film is, I think, 80 minutes. So it's 20 minutes longer than 1 hour. And after 1 hour, it starts to become more and more strange and absurd. And at the end of the film, Orson Welles comes and says, I told you the first hour is true. I didn't tell you that the whole film is true, because the film is longer. So it's a very clever thing that and shows that how much you can lie, and I mean, you can tell everything to the audience, they believe it, and you can cheat on them, and you can change the reality. And even the scenes that you saw, like his cameraman, there is the cameraman there, and he pretends that his friend is there and is shooting him, but of course another camera is also shooting him with this, and so on. So there are different versions of reality. Classically, when film was invented, the films were, documentaries were a view to the world. People could not travel everywhere and so on, and they sent cameramen into the world. They filmed life in different countries. And they were like postcards. You could see a view of the world. So it was to tell one half of the world how the other half lives was mostly the main goal of the documentaries. One thing that is remained in the main, like one of the main morals of the documentary films, is the fact that documentary films try to make a change, try to solve problems, try to point out problems, try to be social in a way, and they function as eye-openers, documentaries, as a way to see where usually someone doesn't look at. And this is in a way, of course, our goal, to not entertain only. Of course, documentaries are very entertaining, like you could see in this film too. We should not be afraid of entertaining, but we should always, I think, in my point of view, think about the fact that when we make a documentary, we spend a lot of time of our life in making it, any film. But documentaries have the possibility and the problem that you can self-exploit yourself till you get a heart attack. Because making documentaries, you don't need so much money. You can make it sometimes without money. You need yourself, and if you can work with the camera, maybe sometimes you don't need a cameraman and you need the sound. And sometimes you don't even have money for a sound person, so you put a microphone on your camera and you can make it theoretically as one person. But that's also the problem, of course, that you do everything yourself and you don't have any reflection from other partners who can give you different points of view. And that's why if we spend most of our time in our life for it, then we can think about this. We should think about these social issues and try to make a change with it. This is a classical explanation of what documentaries should be. The home of the documentary is the street. It's a place among those who have no voice. There where people have no voice, to give voice to the unheard and unseen. Is this right? Yeah, you make like this. Why?
Well, it doesn't have to be.
Yes, you're right. It doesn't have to be. Why not going to those who have a lot of, to the rich ones, to those who ruin the world, to the capitalists, to these people who have a voice, they use it, they use it upon us. So it doesn't have to be like that. It's coming from a classical point of view. Documentaries can be about superstars and reveal the bad sides of them or the good sides. It doesn't have to be like that. So this is most of the times it's about a standpoint. It's about argument. You have to have a focus when you make a documentary and decide what you want to tell. This is of course in any story, but in films, I mean, you can, if you write a novel, if you write a book, you can write a lot of things around it, a lot of details. You can go into the thoughts of your characters, whatever. This you cannot do in films, and you have to think about every second of the film that is very precious to tell something. And so move from a view to the world to what documentaries were in the beginning, like showing touristic views of the world, into arguments and standpoints. And for your arguments and standpoints, you can use whatever you want, whatever tool you think is needed. And I will make a quick overview of different styles. Wait a second. Yes, I will just look a little bit of 6 main modes of documentary filmmaking, of documentary style, because there is, of course, this look at documentaries that only direct cinema documentaries, like films of Wiseman and these great directors, without a doubt, are the real documentaries. So documentaries who only observe and through the observation come closer to a subject, to a matter, to something, without the intervention of the director. So what I was saying before, the example that I brought, that would not be possible in direct cinema or cinema verite style documentaries. In that kind of documentaries, you have no music. You have only music if it's in the film, in front of the camera happening. You have only, you're not allowed to interfere with your subject. You're not allowed to talk to it and so on. You're not allowed to change the reality. You're allowed to be there, and you should make yourself as small as possible. So there is this explanation of fly on the camera, like you would be a fly on the wall, the camera, and just observe what's happening. As the best form of a representation of reality. It is in a way right, but it's also wrong, of course, because if you want to represent reality, it doesn't mean that you can represent reality if you look at it. If I look at you, I film you, this is a reality maybe that people are sitting in this room, but if I don't talk to you, if I don't know why you're here, what is going on in your head, if you think that what I'm saying is stupid or not and so on, I don't come closer to your reality. I just make like a picture. So I think we should look at the subject that we want to make a film about and decide which form of representation of reality, of transformation of reality we need for that subject. Sometimes it can be this point of view of cinema verite or direct cinema, because especially in institutionalized topics like filming a museum or healthcare house or whatever, this has proved to be a very good way of showing things. But for other, can you imagine Michael Moore film, strictly observational, without his voice, without himself in the image? It's not possible. It's a different style, and documentaries have different genres. Like a fiction film, you can look at it as different genres. You can decide you want to make horror film or what, and the same, you can decide if you want to make this kind of documentary or that kind. The good thing is that everything is free. You can mix the styles, of course, but you still have to decide on excuse me, on your way of focusing, how you want it. Because it should not look like you know about the different styles and then you take whatever you want and you do it. So the classical mode is this expository mode. The classical mode is what we know from TV, like animal films, you have a voiceover, or historical documentaries and so on. You have someone who is, like a voiceover. The commentator is kind of a voice of God. It's heard but not seen, and the voiceover knows everything. So he knows, like a scientist who knows everything about all the animals that you see, and has a very good voice, is a good actor. This voiceover, so it's really kind of a God person. The editing is in these films used for continuity. You should not see the editing. It's like it should flow, Most of the time these films, they are edited, they have a text, the voiceover text, and then they are edited to the text, which is making them a little bit weak, because the images are just used to illustrate what is said. So it proved that. And sorry, one reason for that is that expository mode documentaries are mostly TV documentaries, and the TV makers are thinking of the audience as people who are ironing and who are cooking at the same time, and not looking at the TV the whole time. So everything has to be heard also. So you can close your eyes most of the time when they are not so good documentaries, and you can enjoy sleeping and listening to that sound, and you will understand the film too. They use a variety of footages and mix them, interviews, stills, whatever. And they want to, they have their own logic, and they want to make you believe this logic. So this is, this is like the classical one that we all of course know. Then the observational mode that I was talking about is location shooted, most of the time hand cameras. These kind of films came out in the 60s when cameras became were not so heavy anymore, and people could go on the streets and film the people on the streets and so on. The takes are long. It's not so much edited, because if you want to have a feeling for the reality and for the pace of a reality and the time of the reality, you need to look at it. You need to have time for that. So the takes are long. It's not so much edited. There is direct sound, and that means what we see is what we hear, and there is nothing put above it. No interviews, no voiceover in the purest form, and the documentary maker is hidden. The subject pretended they are. The subjects pretend that they are not filmed, and this is, of course, classical lie. And that's why I'm kind of very skeptical always about this. If the subject, I mean, the camera is there, they are filmed. They pretend the whole time that we are not there. So this is for me not real, because if they pretend the whole time, so they are playing the whole time to be so different that we think that we are not there. I prefer someone looks into the camera and realizes, okay, we're there, and maybe I'm different because you're here. I'm not pretending that I'm there. So maybe look a little bit into an example that is a little bit different. Just in the beginning of, for example, this observational mode, what you can do with very simple things. I would like to show you a little bit of a Krzysztof Kieślowski documentary. Kieślowski was in the beginning a documentary filmmaker, and then he realized, he made one film. It's called From a Night Porter's Point of View. I cannot show it now because it's like 15 minutes. It's not very long. His documentaries were not very long. Most of them are around 15 minutes. One long was 52 minutes. And I show you a little bit of his film Talking Heads, because Talking Heads is also a thing that people in documentary films is kind of something that the purists, they say, no, this is not so good to have talking heads in the film. And of course in all TV films you have talking heads and so on. And just a simple glimpse of this beautiful film of Kieślowski about talking heads. It's called Talking Heads even. And what was interesting with Kieślowski was that when he made this film, From a Night Porter's View, this night porter is a real asshole. So he's a conservative guy. He likes John Wayne. He likes to have weapons. He's really like the representation of bureaucracy, and he's someone who checks if someone does something wrong and he reports it and so on.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
There is a very famous novel in Turkish which is called Bekçi Murtaza. I mean, it's about a porter called Murtaza. I mean, it's so similar. I had to say.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, aklıma şey geldi. Bizim Bekçi Murtaza karakterini anlatıyor sanki ve bu da bir bekçi. Enteresan geldi bu bağlantı. Onu belirtmek istedim.
So, when Kieślowski made this film, the reactions on that were kind of really extreme, because a lot of people hated this guy. And Kieślowski didn't make the film because he hated the guy. He was interested in people. He did films about different people, and this guy was like this. So it was for him interesting to see what this kind of person thinks. But the guy became a lot of negative response, and because of this, they say that Kieślowski stopped making documentaries because he realized what an effect making documentaries has on the people. And that it's not responsible, he didn't want to be responsible for the effect that a film can have on people. This is interesting and very radical to decide not to make a film, a documentary anymore, because you have an influence on the life of people, but this influence can also be in a positive way. Anyway, just let's watch this short thing.
W którym roku się urodziłeś? Kim ty jesteś? A co jest dla ciebie najważniejsze? Czego byś chciał?
Ja mam 2 lata.
Kim ty właściwie jesteś?
Palkę.
A czego byś chciał?
Nie.
A kim ty jesteś?
Maluszkiem.
A co byś ty chciał?
Być samochodem syrenką.
A kim jesteś?
Nie wiem.
A co byś chciała?
Malować konia. I mieć konia. Jestem brzydką brunetką. Chciałabym nie chodzić do szkoły i mieć fajne dziecko. Nie bardzo wiem, kim jestem, ale najbardziej lubię czytać książki. Najbardziej bym chciała jechać do Ameryki.
Jestem chyba trochę inna niż swoje koleżanki. Chciałabym, żeby papież przyjechał do Polski.
Nie jestem jeszcze w pełni przygotowany do jakiegoś takiego podjęcia jakichś poważniejszych decyzji. Chciałbym, żeby z naszego codziennego życia zniknęła taka jakaś brak poszanowania między ludźmi, żeby się ludzie po prostu bardziej na siebie uwagę zwracali, żeby się więcej miłości pojawiło wśród całego społeczeństwa.
Jestem troszkę samolubny, egoistyczny. Nie mam szacunku do wszystkich ludzi, ale przy okazji jestem koleżeński. Wiem, że to jest dziwne, ale jednak tak jest. A co bym chciał? Chciałbym się zmienić, chciałbym zmienić charakter swój. No chciałbym, żeby nie miał tylu wad i wtedy bym był szczęśliwym. Jeżeli coś sobie bije, to głowy, to raczej tego dokonuję. Czego bym chciała? Chciałabym, żeby wszyscy ludzie robili coś dla kogoś, żeby nie dążyli tylko, żeby zrobić coś dla siebie, żeby robili także dla innych. A także, aby zrozumieli wreszcie, że dążenie za takimi właśnie materialnymi rzeczami nie daje zupełnie.
Czuję się wychowankiem domu dziecka. Chciałbym, żeby każdy był zadowolony ze swojego dzieciństwa. Żeby każdej osoby dzieciństwo było piękne.
Jestem człowiekiem raczej bezproblemowym, bezkonfliktowym. Przez życie przechodzę teraz raczej z uśmiechem. Chciałbym, żeby było tak dalej. To mi pomaga żyć.
Jestem dziewczyną, która nie bardzo umie pogodzić swoje pragnienia, marzenia z szansą faktycznej realizacji tego. A chciałabym większej pewności, kryteriów ocen, postępowania. Wiedzieć to, co jest dobre, co złe.
Okay. It goes on like this till you have at the end a woman who is 100 years old, and he asks her, and she said, "What you ask me what I want from life? Continue living." So it's a nice example that shows what is the core element of documentary films, and it's humans. People here, we don't know any story of these people. Each of them said one sentence, and you want to spend time with them. So this is a beautiful thing. I think that we should think about to find people who are representing something and their reality, and that is the only reality that I think counts, not our cinematic approach or whatever and so on. The people, and if we understand what are the people and what they want to say and what is their reality, then we can think of how we can connect to that reality and transport this reality with filmic elements into a different level of reality. So this was the second mode I wanted to mention quickly. The third mode is the participatory mode, also called the interactive mode. This is classical films like Michael Moore films or Super Size Me and so on. Films in which the documentary filmmaker and his crew is interacting with the subject. Interviews are dominating, but they tend to be former, on-the-run questioning, which is a like classical way of the 80s and 70s, that the reporter is walking with the characters and asking them questions, which is more dynamic, which is more authentic, because most of the people that are being interviewed, they don't have time for the interviewer. No one wants to talk to Michael Moore. He's getting on the nerves of everyone. That's why he can only get in most of the interviews when he's walking with them. The use of archive material, stills, news, footage and so on is important. It's location shooted, handheld cameras most of the time. Also longer takes are dominating, but in Michael Moore films you have also, of course, also a lot of quick animations and stuff and so on. So it's not so pure anymore, this style. The voiceover is most of the times by the filmmaker himself, and he becomes an identification character for the audience. So if you have a topic where someone has to fight for something, you have different ways. You can choose a character. I mean, he has this film called, his first film was Roger and Me. I don't know if you know this film. And it's a film about him, the place he was born, I think it's Michigan, and he tries, Michigan, I think it's the place where Ford had his factories for years, and he's going on a quest. He wants to meet the chief of Ford and ask him why they are closing down the factory, because his father and his generation, they had work, and why they are going away from there. So the whole time he tries to find this guy and to confront him and talk to him. He didn't manage, but he does something which, of course, you can also question. Second. Which shows also the different levels. I hope I can find it. Yeah, he wants to meet the guy, so he is in front of the camera, going around, meeting different people, workers and so on, and trying to come closer to the guy to get his answer.
Im Gesicht gegenüberzutreten. In der Rolle eines GM-Aktionärs verschaffte ich mir Zutritt zur jährlichen GM-Hauptversammlung.
Sorry, I just realized that it's German. Just think that this film is...
I sat patiently as dozens of stockholders aired their grievances. It was time to confront Roger face to face. Posing as a GM stockholder, I got into the annual GM shareholders meeting. I sat patiently as dozens of stockholders aired their grievances to the board. Finally, it was my turn at the mic.
Microphone number 40, is somebody that has not had an opportunity to speak yet?
Mr. Chairman,
I have Mr. Michael Moore, a stockholder from Flint, Michigan.
Mr. Gilbert, I wonder if you'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman?
I think we've answered all the questions of the people. I think everyone has had a turn at the mic.
I have one question.
All right, moved and adjourned. Thank you all very much. You've been a great audience. He was asleep.
Well, he kind of was low and he didn't know what the hell to do. I think he was surprised.
Okay.
For whatever reason.
Me too. But I'm going to leave this stuff here and let him go, okay?
So, there's a rumor that Michael Moore never was in that room. It was a friend of him. There was not such a situation. But for the film, it was good to prove that this Roger didn't want to talk to him. So Michael Moore reconstructed that dark thing, you know, that the shot that he is coming and he wants to talk and no one listens to him. But in reality, he was never there. This never happened. Someone went there to shoot this whole situation, but without him. But it was good for him to have himself in the film, to put himself there, because this showed the fight of a small guy against the big General Motors guy. So is this okay or not? It's a question that Michael Moore has to decide for himself. Of course, it would be good for us to know that he reconstructed this. If he would say, I was not there, but a friend of mine tried to talk to them and they didn't let him. I reconstructed it. It must have been like this. Then it would be interesting for us to look at the scene and realize, okay, this is a different form of reality and I'm not cheating. This is the problem that I have a little bit with it. Although I like some of his films are great, and I think it's very important that someone like Michael Moore is there and makes these kind of films. Sometimes the borders are a little bit too much crossed, and you have a little bit feeling when you realize what is the truth, how it happens, that you have been cheated. But it's fair enough, you know. He reaches what he wants, and he never says in the beginning that all the scenes that you see are real, like Orson Welles did. Then there is the reflexive mode. This mode borrows techniques from fiction film or for an emotional subject to response. The expressive nature of film, it's anti-realistic, reenactments, dramatic music, expressive lighting. There is sometimes voiceover, but this voiceover can be a character, can be uncertain. It's not like the first version that we talked about. It's not like a version that is real and pretending to be a god, to be someone who knows everything. And is going very far away from what documentary in the beginning was, or the theory of documentary is. So it's rather relying on suggestions and not facts. There is a very nice example I would like to show you, and I think these examples show very good what all can be documentary, and how you can treat your topics with different forms of reality, of representation of reality. I'm showing you now an example for this reflexive way of representing documentary film. The beginning of a film called Wisconsin Death Trip. It's a film about the historic events and shows how you can, for example, deal with archive.
We can say, honestly, that we know of few states or cities which offer the advantages of those enjoyed by Wisconsin and Black River Falls. Our city was founded in 1854 and soon attracted industrious settlers from Norway, Germany, and other countries of the European continent. The Winnebago Indians, who are native to the region, never made any trouble worthy of mention to the white settler. Some years ago, they were encouraged to leave for settlements in the west, but many have returned to live in bands around the county, where they remain largely hidden away. Our site is not only picturesque, it boasts a rich and fertile countryside which grows everything known to this climate in abundance. And we are proud to have a railway line connecting us to other parts of the state. When considering all these advantages, it is safe to assume that nowhere in the length and breadth of this great continent of ours can be found a more desirable residence than Black River Falls. There were 2 feet of snow on the ground at Iron County, where the mercury hovered below the 0 mark most of the time. The mines began shutting down last June, and at present there's not a single mine in operation in the entire range. Strong men were found weeping because their wives and children had nothing to eat and next to nothing to wear. Many of the single men are leaving the country and seeking a living elsewhere, and the railroads are furnishing free transportation.
So this is also documentary. You can see it's based on real events. It has real pictures of this thing. There is an event that happened. They go to this town. They use the elements of that time, like the train and everything. And then of course they reenact and they use elements of fiction film to reconstruct the reality of 100 years ago. Which is absolutely okay, because there is no other way. That's a creative, what we were talking about, the creative way of dealing with reality. So this is was an example of reflexive documentary. Of course, there are a lot of TV documentaries with very bad reenactment, where you have some kings wearing ugly stuff and talking strange and so on. But I think reenactment, if you work on it in a creative way, I mean, you probably heard of the film The Act of Killing, which went very extreme to take mass murderers and killers and give them the chance to redo what they did. And this is, of course, creating a lot of questions of what you are allowed morally, on a moral sense, to do and not. Let's go to another one. This performative, the reflexive documentary is what we had. Performative documentary and crew, we had these two. So then we have the poetic mode. And the poetic mode is the most author-driven version of documentary. Is completely moving from that, what these explanations that we were looking at in the beginning, is moving from the reality, as everyone can see it, into a reality of the filmmaker and his thoughts. So it's very subjective, it's not objective anymore. It's looking for a different level of truth. And it's, of course, very manipulative in a way. The pictures are manipulated and the order they are there. So if there is like a voiceover, it's the thoughts of the director, of the writer, that make us reread the reality in a different way. Let's see if we can. I mean, a very good example is Sans Soleil by Chris Marker. I don't know if some of you know this classical film. Let's see if you can watch just the first minute. It's so bad that everything is on iTunes, on YouTube. This is not possible. Very good. This one. Yeah. Very good.
The first image he told me about was of 3 children on a road in Iceland in 1965. He said that for him it was the image of happiness, and also that he had tried several times to link it to other images, but it never worked. He wrote me, "One day I'll have to put it all alone at the beginning of a film, with a long piece of black leader. If they don't see happiness in the picture, at least they'll see the black." He wrote, "I'm just back from Hokkaido, the northern island. Rich and hurried Japanese take the plane, others take the ferry. Waiting, immobility, snatches of sleep. Curiously, all of that makes me think of a past or future war. Night trains, air raids, fallout shelters. Small fragments of war enshrined in everyday life. He liked the fragility of those moments suspended in time, those memories whose only function had been to leave behind nothing but memories. He wrote, "I've been around the world several times, and now only banalities still interest me. On this trip, I've tracked it with the relentlessness of a bounty hunter. At dawn, we'll be in Tokyo."
Okay, so if you look at this, I mean, this film, you should watch this film. It's probably one of the most important 100 films of all time, and it's a masterpiece and special because it deals with what we see and how we see reality and how we can see it, how many different ways there are, and it's a film about filmmaking. If you look at the first thing, again.
The first image he told me about was of 3 children on a road in Iceland in 1965.
Okay, so we hear the voice of a woman. She's talking about someone, him who told her something. That the first image we will see is 3 children in Iceland. Then we see this. There's no sound.
He said,
okay, so it can be that it was this image that he was talking about, but we don't know if these 3 children are really children in Iceland or somewhere else, or if it's that image that she's talking about. There is no proof for it.
He said that for him it was the image of happiness, and also that he had tried several times to link it to other images, but it never worked. He wrote me.
So she says that he said for him it was the representation of happiness. So we go back, look at this picture again. I mean, unfortunately the quality is not so bad, but also in the better version.
In 1965.
These children, if you look at it in a better quality, they don't look
He
very
said
happy.
that for him.
They don't look very happy, and it looks a little bit strange, like they are forcing the one in the middle to go somewhere. So if you look at the picture closely, you're not sure if it's really that picture that she was talking about him, because they don't look happy, and they are this one is pushing the other one, and they look a little bit shy, they don't smile. So is this really the picture that she was talking about? And she adds something. First, this is the first picture because it's for the guy, for whoever he is, the representation of happiness. But she also said that he tried everything to link it to other images, which didn't work. So it's about editing. We link images to each other and hope that it works, and hope that it generates a different reality, a third reality between the first image and the second. So what happens here?
He said that for him it was the image of happiness, and also that he had tried several times to link it to other images, but it never worked. He wrote me.
We see an image of warplanes which has nothing to do with these children, but because a genius made this film, we have to think it has to have something to do with it. It has to have something. Is it maybe a film about war and childhood and about like happiness of children and what can be on the other side? Because if it didn't work, why did he choose exactly this picture to prove that it's not fitting to each other? Of course, we want to find the reason why it fits to each other.
One day I'll have to put it all alone at the beginning of a film.
Okay.
One day I'll have to put it all alone at the beginning of a film with the long images, but it never worked. He wrote me. One day I'll have to put it all alone at the beginning of a film with a long piece of black leader. If they don't see happiness in the picture, at least they'll see the black.
That's great. I get goosebumps when I look at it again. So, she explains exactly what we saw. We saw the beginning of a film. The guy said I have to put it in the beginning of a film one day, with black in between. And so it becomes clear that the guy she's talking about is probably the filmmaker. And the filmmaker is, of course, the guy who wrote the text that she's talking about. So all the realities are mixing. And what he says is, one day I have to put it in the beginning of a film. So if they don't see happiness, which I didn't see, then at least they see the black, with black leader, you know, like black material in between. And that's the only reality that maybe we can agree upon. That at least we see black and we can all say, okay, this is black. But all the rest is different in each of the heads of us. We see the title of the film in different languages, which is also different realities. We see images of a ship and details, fragments of people. The sound that we hear could be some sound of their inner part of that ship, but it can also be something completely different. Because it's a kind of...
I'm just back from Hokkaido, the northern island. Rich and hurried Japanese take the plane, others take the ferry. Waiting, immobility, snatches of sleep. Curiously, all of that makes me think of a past or future war. Night trains, air raids, fallout shelters. Small fragments of war enshrined in everyday life.
So, maybe it's really about the war. When we think now about the warplanes that we saw in the beginning, so now we become suspicious. It was maybe not without a reason that he put the planes in the beginning. And what he does here, he filmed people in Japan on a ferry, sleeping, making their nap, but because of the sound and because it's strange, it looks a little bit frightening, the sound sounds frightening, he reinterprets the reality that he saw. He says that these people look like they are waiting for a war, or like the time is before a war, and so on. And he again gives us another information that it's in Japan, and the rich people, they use the plane, and the poor people, they use this ferry. So we know who these people are suddenly, and we know where the whole situation is playing, and so on. So we cannot analyze the film continually now. This was only 2 minutes, not even 1:26. But take a look at this film and read about it. It's really saying a lot about how films can be made. So this was the poetic mode. There are a lot of examples. Maybe you know Baraka or Koyaanisqatsi and these films. Yeah. So this was this. I want to go through this. Questions? No. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the reality of like something a little bit more pragmatic with some examples. Writing for documentaries. So how much can we predict the reality if we want to make a documentary? And why the impossible thing is useful? Because it's very useful to write for documentaries, although we think that the reality cannot be predicted. And there is no unified praxis across Europe. The documentary material that you apply for films, they look different. The terms are different. In one country, the term for synopsis is like 2 sentences, in another country is 2 pages. And compared to fiction film where you have a screenplay which is standardized. You don't have a standardized model, so that makes it a little bit more difficult, but it's also beauty of it because reality and people, they cannot be standardized, and that's why it's different. So the most important is, if you want to make films, documentary films, is that you collect your material, you make your research, and you write your material in somehow. Write it down, write it on papers, write it on post-its or whatever, put it somewhere. When you have the idea, when you make the research, think of different scenes that are possible and just write it down, because otherwise you forget it, and later when you have a pile of material you can sit and reorganize it and look at it. So this is a very good way to make also filmmakers who, like young filmmakers who don't have so much experience, to give them confidence in their subject. Because documentary filmmakers write too little. They take immediately a camera, and nowadays it's not very expensive to have a camera from someone, and they go and shoot. Which is okay for, you can also shoot for research and so on, but you should always think of the fact that most of the things can be reshot. And the more you are researching, the more you know about your subject and so on, the more you are prepared for what you cannot predict. Because then you feel so secure when you're on the set, when you're shooting, that whatever happens, you know how to deal with it. And of course, the most beautiful thing is in documentary films are the moments that you cannot recreate. But they will come if you know the whole situation, if you feel secure, if you if you are not nervous when you're shooting, and you can only not be nervous if you know your situation and subject so good that you nearly know 90-95% of what can happen. And most of the times you know what can happen. If you have a character, if you have a person, you make research, you want to make a film about the life of that person, 90% is routine. This person wakes up, makes this thing, and so on and so on. There is a very nice example of, I think it's a Russian director, it's called Dvortsevoi. I don't know how to write it. I try just something. Wrong. So he did a film. I think it's called Heaven. If you can watch it, try to watch it. It's shot in the Kazakh steppe, and he made research. And there are two great scenes in the film. I just explained it to you. In one scene you see a little boy of these people who are working there in the with cows and so on, and the little boy is sitting in front of a little pot of milk, and is it's not coming, and is eating the milk with the spoon, and it's a baby like 2 years old, and it's one shot. You see this baby, and the baby eats the milk and becomes more and more tired, and then like this, and then wakes up again and sees the milk again and eats it again a little bit, and then falls kind of into the milk. It's very funny, and you think, oh, what a great chance the guy had that he was there when this happened to the child. But in reality, this happened 2-3 times a week. He did a research, so he could perfectly position his camera, he knew what will happen again, and he shot it in a perfect way. There is another situation in that film which is also great. You see a cow on the, like on the steppe, and there's like a little boy running around, and the father is doing something and so on, and suddenly they scream. The father screams, "Ah, this idiot, he did it again!" And then the camera pans over to the cow, and there is this big pot where they put the milk in it, and the cow has stick his head into that, and like in a comic movie, the big pot head and he's running around. So you have the cow running around, it's very funny, and he has this big metal can on his head, and he cannot get it away from his head. Impossible, you think that, you know, this is the best thing that could happen to him, but even this is something that he observed in these 2-3 months, and this happened maybe one time a week or something. So it shows how much, if you make good research, you can be prepared to shoot these moments that are beautiful, because you're secure, you know what is going on. So yeah, and what is interesting is that if you want to make documentaries, the film fund people, they don't want to see you. They don't want to meet you because they get a lot of applications for films, and they don't want to see you because they feel maybe ashamed that they have to say no to 99% of filmmakers. The TV commissioners, they want meetings because they like to, they have to work more with you, and they want to see what kind of person you are. When you make this kind of documentary documents, they are different. They are development material where you can also shoot stuff and so on, and you can, at the end, when you apply for the whole production, you have a production proposal, which means that you have to write down maybe 10-20 pages of script about the possible scenes in your documentary. And because we're talking about different forms of reality, of course it's not possible to predict everything that happens. But what I do, for example, is when I do research and I write an application for Film Fund, is that I write in the beginning of the whole treatment that this treatment or script that you will read is based on the research that I made so far, on talks that I had with people, on things that I read and so on. And it is possible that this will be changed through the happenings of the shooting. So in this way, I kind of write a preamble before the whole document that this is a reality that I have now at this point of view, so you can feel what is going to be in the film, but this is not the reality that it will be maybe at the end of the film, because the characters can change, whatever, a lot of things can happen. But in this way you can protect yourself from the fact that maybe Film Fund people come and say, what is this? You wrote a script about a documentary, but in the end the film is different. It's not like that. And then you can say, yeah, documentary is about real life and it cannot be the same. You know, what do you want? You wanted a script and I wrote you a script. So the most important things that you can research are the predictable and pre-imaginable things versus the unpredictable ones. So you need to have predictable and pre-imaginable scenes in your script. That means if you are making a film about whatever, you go and make research, you talk to these people, you observe the life of the people, and you can write down 90% of the life of, let's say you want to make a story about homeless Syrian people on the streets in Istanbul, and what is the life of them every day? They sit there, they beg, they struggle, they freeze, and so on. This happens every day. But what is, if you are with them and close to them, you come to another level of reality because you spend more time with them than us who just pass by and we have a bad conscience if we don't pay something for them. So you become a different ambassador for a different reality because you take your time. So there are different phases of development, of course. First phase is that you have a need, you want to make a film about something. But it should not be like, I want to make a film about something because it's very cool to make films. It should be something that you really, especially for documentaries, you really have in your heart and you want to do it because you think it's important that people know about Syrian beggars on the street, what maybe their life was before. So you want to do it and you start to make your own research, most of the times, of course, without money. Then you decide, okay, this is a topic that I really want to make a film about. First, it was an idea. Maybe it would be interesting to make a film about Syrian beggars. And then you go and you meet with some of them and you realize what interesting lives they had before and how sad the whole situation is, and you want to make a film. You say, okay, I really want to make this film. You decide to go into production. So the question is then always, is the film ready to be made? That means, for example, in this case, are the Syrian refugees who are on the street, do they want to be filmed? Or are they ashamed of the fact that they are sitting on the street? They don't want anyone of their family or whatever see in what kind of bad situation they are. They have pride, they have their honor, they don't want anyone to see this. So, is the reality ready to be filmed is one important question. The other thing is, are you ready to do it as a filmmaker? Because your reality is maybe a great, like you have a nice life and you live here and you have a good place to stay and so on, and your job, but if you want to make this film with them, they decide maybe to go back and you have to follow them if you want to make an honest film about the real life. You cannot just film them sitting on the street from day to the evening. Of course you can make that too, but it's probably not coming closer to the reality. So are you ready to go to that? Are you ready to be with them day and night? For example, when we did our film Everyday Rebellion about different forms of creative non-violent rebellion, we were in New York. And in America you can shoot people on the streets. If it's a public place, you can shoot them. There were the Occupy people, they had their assemblies and meetings in the park, and we went there and we asked them if we can shoot them, although we knew that we can shoot them. And we asked them if there is someone who is not comfortable with being filmed, maybe you can sit on that side and we shoot in this direction and we don't shoot this person. This was very important because we wanted to make clear for them we're not there to exploit them. This is an important issue because we are making a lot of times films about socially problematic situations of people. In a way, there is always the danger that we exploit their sad situations. That we make our next film and then we're gone. We'll go on vacation when the film is finished. The Syrian family is still on the street. So where is the border of your reality and the reality of the subject that you're filming about? And how can you be fair to them and make something together? I did, for example, a film about a women's house, women's shelter. I worked there for 1 year as a civil service, instead of military service. And I met great women who had difficult situations. Some of them were drug addicts, some had psychological problems, some were runaways from the families and so on. And 10 years later I went back and met some of them. Of course they were not in the house anymore, but there were other women in the house, and I decided to make a film with them. And I asked them, of course there were 40 women in that house, and I asked anyone who wants to be filmed can come and we can talk about it. And like 10, 12 of them came and we had a meeting and we talked about it because it was clear for me that this is a very shameful situation that these women are in. They are in a shelter. This is kind of, some of them think that this is the last place before they are killing themselves or whatever. But in reality it's a very good place for them because they get care, they calm down and they are prepared for a new life. But anyway, a lot of them feel ashamed. So I asked them that I told them I want to make this film because of these reasons, because you were not heard, you didn't have the possibility to express your problems to the society didn't listen to you, and I want to make this film with you and not about you. And for me this is very important in my way of filmmaking, that I want to so far I made only films about people that I like, documentaries about people that I like, and I want to look into their eyes after I made the film too. And I don't want to be ashamed, I don't want to make a film and say goodbye to them. So most of the time you become friends. Of course, I cannot meet them permanently, but still we're friends. So I decided to make this film with them, and they agreed. And of course, when you make a film, you need a paper where the people sign that they want to make this film. And I told them, you have to sign this paper if you are agreeing that I film you, but I will not push with bad questions. I will not ask you things that are uncomfortable for you. You just tell me you give me what you want to give me. And that's the border for me. If you want it, you can use me, because I'm also using you for the film in a way. I'm making this film about you, and I have at the end a film that hopefully will be a good film. So you give me something, you give me your pain, your stories, and I want to give you something back. So use me as a filmmaker, use the film for your cause, talk about the things that you didn't talk, you couldn't talk, no one was listening to you. And this was great, because slowly after 2-3 months, they realized that I really mean it honestly, and I was there, and I spent nights there, and Sundays, and Christmas, and whatever, and they realized that I'm really on their side. I want to understand what's going on with them. And this was very helpful. This was very helpful because when we had the premiere of the film in a festival, it was like opening in Vienna, 800 people in the cinema, and these women came to the screening, and it was when they didn't, what I promised them too was that they signed the paper, but there is a sentence that they are allowed to watch, they will watch the film first, the rough cut of the film, before anyone else watches it, and if there is a scene in the film that they don't like or they feel ashamed, I will cut it out. So I showed them the rough cut. No one wanted anything to be cut out, because what is also interesting is that the reality of the people that you film is a lot of times different than the reality of the film that they will watch later. Because when you film someone, they think it's a film about them. But later, when they watch the whole film, they see that they are part of a chain of things. They are part of a topic, and they are, it's not only about them, and like everyone them and says, look at this woman, she's a bad woman or whatever, but it's about a society that is not listening to women and so on. So then they understand the bigger level of it, and they are proud to be there. So when we had the screening of the film, when they came into the cinema, it was like, they were of course very nervous. They were never exposed to 800 people. And then after the film, they had standing ovations of these 800 people, and they went out very proud and were very happy. I'm bringing this example because we are changing the life of our subjects when we make a film. Different, of course, if you make a historical film, you will not change anything. But if you make film about real people, be aware of the fact that you are changing with your film their lives. And you can do it in a good way. It doesn't have to be in an exploitative way and so on. It's important that you start a dialogue with the people, to talk to them and ask them. And you can also, if you make research, you can also redo stuff that you saw that you liked. For example, I show you an example of when I was there, like 10 years ago, and I did this civil service. I shot with a small camera some material, because I wanted to, at the end of the year, give a little film, like half an hour for the house, so that when visitors come and they want to see what's going on there, they see what's going on. So we went on a trip with the girls and the women, and at one time they put their head out and screamed and looked out, and it was kind of nice, because most of the time they have move forward. Most of the time they were like sad and like depressed, and this time in nature they looked worked out, and it was a nice moment that I had in my head. And so 10 years later, when I had new women and shot, and they went on the same trip. This is something that every year the leaders of the house go with the social workers go with them to this trip. Then I had this image in my head, and then I shot it with the new women again. So just a little example of like research, and then you know, you have an impression in your head what you would like to do, and then and you do it. Another example. Yes, another example that I would like to show you about this kind of different realities is I would like to show you one scene that we shot for our documentary Everyday Rebellion, and another film team shot for their film. So you have two different materials, and we exchanged material. We gave them our material, and they gave their material to us. And it's an example about how to focus on what your subject is and what is your reality. So I show you first. One second, please. Where did I put it? Okay, it's here. So the situation is like this. Our documentary is a documentary about different forms of creative non-violent rebellion worldwide. And one of the groups that we followed was Femen, the Ukrainian topless activists. And then there was a scene in France where the Egyptian activist Alia El Magdi, who posted a naked picture of her, black and white picture on her blog, was she had to flee the country, and she went to Sweden. She was supposed to come to France and to protest in front of the Egyptian embassy, because there was the time when there was this Sharia law thing. and somehow the Swedish government or whatever, the Secret Service and so on, didn't allow her to come to France. And it was, the whole thing was very strange. I went from Austria to shoot this event in the morning. It was supposed to happen that time. She didn't get the permission, and the feminine girls decided to do not an action but an explanation in front of the embassy. So this is a film. It's in French. I don't have the another version, but it's not so important. It's a more reportage style film, 1 hour film, French film about women's movement.
Après l'Euro, les femmes ont fait les Jeux Olympiques pour dénoncer des regrets.
So we move to the situation that we shot. Yeah. So this is.
Quelques jours plus tard à Paris, Alia et les femmes doivent manifester ensemble devant l'ambassade égyptienne.
So this is in Paris in front of the Egyptian embassy.
Mais Alia El-Mahdi manque à l'appel.
La blogueuse égyptienne Alia El-Mahdi n'a pas pu sortir d'un pays de la zone Schengen. Sans aucune raison, sans aucune explication, elle n'a pas pu quitter le pays. Allô Alia, Célina, tu m'entends?
Oui, je t'entends. Nous avions prévu de protester devant l'ambassade. C'était contre la Constitution qui doit être votée.
La révolution, elle n'appartient pas qu'aux hommes, elle appartient aussi aux femmes. Et les femmes vont continuer à se battre dans les...
Okay. So this is what that film made out of the situation. And the focus of that film was Alia El-Mahdi and this situation. The focus of us was something different, and I think it's a very good example.
C'est la jeune femme égyptienne qui a 20 ans après...
Sorry. Subtitles. How does it work? Does anyone know how I can bring the subtitles of menu again? Sure. Then I will translate it quickly for you. It's easier. So,
quelques mois de révolution, a posté une photo
who Alia El-Mahdi was, that she posted this picture, she got death threats, she had to leave the country, and she says, we are here because we wanted to make a protest with feminine and Arabic women against the suppression of women in Arabic countries. Can we go? Why not? Can we go?
Can you explain? Can you speak? No, no. Is there speak in French? It's strange.
Then it seems to be a demonstration.
No, we were just here to make a statement. Wait, why is demonstration? Where you have signs of demonstration? No one's doing
you're just in front of an embassy.
So, everyone who's in front of the embassy makes demonstration.
Not everybody
we don't have
together.
any slogans, we don't have any posters, we don't scream anything. That's why we can move, because there are no any demonstrations.
Okay, let's see for this.
Can we?
Alright? No, we wait, you wait.
People live with this perception that power in the society comes from the top, and what the guy on the top decides today becomes the reality for the rest of the people tomorrow. Really, the power functions through the structures, institutions, and organizations we call pillars of support. Institutions like police, military, bureaucracy, business community. You need to identify the most important pillars in your society and make a strategy how to pull people out. Really, pulling people out is what makes a difference. In violent struggle, you push. You throw stones, you throw molotovs, you throw bombs, you try to bring down the pillars. In non-violent struggle, you try to persuade the people from the pillars to shift sides and to shift loyalties and to bring them into the movement. Be a little bit for them in this future society so they really decide to shift loyalties. And when people do not obey, rulers cannot rule.
So our focus was something else. We wanted to show the mechanism in that situation and with police and running and so on. So we decided to focus on something else. We decided not to focus information. I mean, the information was in the first part, but we decided to focus on something, and we took the time to look at this guy and film it. And the thing was, which was for me so remarkable in that thing was, I was alone. I didn't have cameraman, or so I did the camera and sound myself. We didn't have money for the team anymore, so I went there, and the idea was to shoot the first meeting of like this topless European movement, which was the opposite of the way you could imagine the Arabic woman. And they wanted, and Alia al-Magdi, the Egyptian blogger, she contacted Femen and said, I would like to make an action with you. And they said, okay, come to Paris, we will do it at this day, election day. So it was a big thing because two cultures were kind of collaborating together to do a radical action. I was prepared for it. I was shooting this film for a long time. And I went there, and actually the shooting failed because this thing didn't happen. It was a very bad thing, you know. I heard she cannot come, and I said, oh, shit, now we spend like our last 500 euros for the plane ticket to fly the next morning, and she doesn't come, and then I stand there and what? You come and just make a communicate. There's no action, nothing. But because I had the confidence of the whole situation, and I was not looking for one thing, I was open to what happens around me. I could have the patience and not go home and stay there and listen and look if there is something else than that what I wanted that can be interesting. And that was the reason why I could capture this moment, because I was not nervous. I was not sad about the fact that the reality didn't happen the way I wanted it. And this is what I was saying about research and so on, that it gives you confidence and it gives you the right weapons to be ready in reality when the magic moments happen. And these magic moments will happen if you are patient. There is another short example, maybe we can watch it, because you're so close to Syria and you have also these refugees. Maybe one more thing. You can ask me in between questions, and this DVD player decides to react to our reality. Any questions? Come on.
أنا ما
here. So it's a refugee camp in Jordan, 8 kilometers from the border. And of course we all know the over-exaggerated image of the nice-looking poor child looking into the camera. This is classic. This is so classic that it's kitsch, and it's a cliche of filmmaking in poor places and poor situations, that children are attracted by you as a camera person and so on, and they come and they look into the camera, and of course you always shoot it because it's always nice, but I think it's important to also reconstruct and deconstruct these kind of cliche images that are there, and they are not cliche, they are reality. Children are coming and shoot, and you shoot it. But if it's possible to, with patience and different point of view, to do something. So we didn't tell this child anything. So it's enough with filming. And it was very good. I mean, the only thing that we said to the child was, our translator said, "Can we film you? Can you stand here and look into the camera?" We didn't tell him to do this, and I filmed him so long that he became angry because maybe he was thinking that I'd take a picture only. And it was a film. It's also a film about non-violent behavior, and you could see how such an innocent child that is so sweet beats the guy, and how close this innocence and brutality are with each other. Time is passing and it's sad, but I would like to talk, although maybe we need 5 more minutes longer, to something that I think is very important when we talked about different realities and how we change the life of our characters. And I want to encourage you not to be afraid of that. Because you can do it in a good way. And I move now to the last part of the talk, which is about how fictional dramaturgical models, because there is no dramaturgical model for documentaries, but how fictional dramaturgical models can help you to structure your film, your documentary. And you can read a lot of books about it. Like there's this 3-act structure with the first, where the first 20 minutes of your film are about the normal life of the character. Then something happens that we call plot point, first plot point. Something happens that changes the life of the character, that the character's life has to go in a different way. Then at the end, like last third, there is a second turning point that changes again the life, and so on. So this is like the classical one. And then there is a famous model of Christopher Vogler. It's called the hero's journey, and most of the films, like hero films, like action films or Lord of the Rings, they are all built like in this model. They have this kind of steps of this hero's journey, and because we live in a time that we have to change our articulation and use female words, we talk about the heroine's model, and we look at this, and I hear a lot of times that people, and myself I did too, want to make films about their family because it's very close to us and we think it's interesting. And so maybe I always bring this example of grandmother. Maybe you decide you would like to make a film about your grandmother because you realize that she is ill and maybe she doesn't live so long anymore. You haven't seen her for a long time. You decide, okay, let's make a film about my grandmother. And your grandmother is most of the time maybe, I'm not talking now about kind of classical Islamic grandmother who was her whole life at home, but let's talk about a grandmother who was not so religious when she was younger and did a lot of cool things, but you don't know about it. So you say, I want to make a film about my grandmother. You go to visit your grandmother, and what does she do? The whole time she sits there, watches maybe soap operas and films and makes the garden, and that's it. You could make a film about that. But if you sit and research and talk to her, maybe you find out that she was in love with Che Guevara, with his picture, of course. She loved her dream. She was a leftist, and her dream was to go to Cuba one time. She never could make it. I'm just fantasizing. And you talk to her, and she says, "Yeah, I never could make it," and so on. And this is like, if I had a wish, it was this. And of course, her physical ability is not very good, and so on. And normally, you would not think about that she could go there. But what if you decide to help her to go there? So if you make this wish for her, just even in her imagination possible, you suddenly realize that she's kind of course, full of life again. And you have instead of filming an old woman who is sitting and watching TV and making the garden, you have suddenly something that is helping her in making her alive again. And if you look at this model, and we go through this maybe stupid example, but there are different ways. So we start at number 1, the illusion of the perfect world. Grandmother is great, she's always there for you, she has the perfect garden, and you think she's happy. And everything is good because everyone loves her. You go and talk to her and you realize that this garden is getting on her nerves, she hates it, she has to do it every time, she makes it since 50 years, so since her husband is dead, she has to do even more. It's not so perfect maybe. The reason why she's the whole time sitting on a chair and watching TV is because no one is coming and visiting her, and all her friends died. So she's alone. If she had people, she would go out and do stuff. So maybe the first view of your grandmother, that she was sitting there and nothing and is happy in her nice garden, is something wrong. So it's the betrayal of the realization that you realize this is not the thing, and you have different coping strategies, you know, for that situation. So you have nothing bad can happen to her because she's there to protect her. She can of course die. Then you have this Cinderella model that man will take care of her, but her husband is dead, so there is not really, maybe there is a neighbor or whatever. The exceptional thing would be that you find out that your grandmother, is not your cliché grandmother that you thought. She is one of the boys. That means she has special abilities. She can be very tough. She was riding a motorcycle when she was 30. You never know this, but now suddenly you find it out when you talk to her. The disappointing thing would be that she's depressed, but she can't change anything. So she is morally down. She says, okay, this is my life, is finished, I'm sitting here and one day I will die and that's it. This is the reality that we know from old people. So you come with the idea, you go more into detail and realize that what you thought, this illusion of the perfect world, is wrong. This is a woman who was a fighter, who left this fighter in her young time, and is depressed because she is alone. No one is interested in her. Everyone underestimated her for years. Her husband also. And you start to compensate that. You talk to her, you find these things out, and you realize she has wishes. And maybe you are someone who can help her, because she's hurt and abused because no one really took care of sitting and talking to her and understanding what's going on with her. She is left without anyone. People take advantage of her. So her children use her as a babysitter. They think it's nice, but maybe your grandmother is not so happy with it the whole time to have all her weekend to take care of the children. You know, maybe it's too much for her. So yes, and then comes the moment when you talk to her, and it's kind of an awakening moment. You ask yourself and her, you find out, okay, grandmother, I apologize for what was there because I was part of that ignorance and denial of your life, and I'm interested in your life. I wanted to make this film with you. What if I organize a journey to Cuba for you? And what is the realistic thing about that happens is that I mean, you made some preparations, you found out how much the ticket is and what is the possibility and so on, so you did some kind of preparation work, but of course the first thing is like your grandmother will not want to do it, you know. It's like she says, no, it's not possible. Your relatives will come and say, are you crazy? You want to bring this woman to Cuba? She will die. I mean, what is this? The last 20 years she was sitting at home. How can she go on such a journey? And so you continue, and so others tell her, for example, she can't do it. And this thing maybe ignites a thing in her that she says, maybe I can do it. Let's fuck their asses and do it. How can I do it? I cannot walk very long. Is there a possibility? And so on. So the whole direction of her is changed. Suddenly she becomes active through your film, through the situation that you created. Because you're a family member, she trusts you. She knows that you don't want to kill her. Then suddenly, like in all these action movies, it can work. You have a character, and the character must find out what are the strong points of the character. So you find out that your grandmother is not only weak, she can do a lot of things, and she has a lot of special receipts and secrets and stuff that she can use in this for this. So you go with her, for example, to a doctor, and you pass these kind of gates of judgment of the family and so on. You go with her to the doctor. The doctor says yes, maybe if if she has a wheelchair and she doesn't have to walk so much, it's possible for her to go on such a journey. Maybe you have to book a first-class ticket for her. You ask the family, grandmother wants to go. If you pay a first class, she can do it, and she took so many years care of your children that you can pay this 1,000 euros. And everyone maybe feels ashamed if they don't do it. So you create something again. It's another example. So you create all the tools and so on, and make the possibility. The eye of the storm is the next level. There is the fear of surviving and abandonment. So there is, of course, in you also the fear that maybe something happens, maybe she gets a heart attack and so on. But you try to prepare the person for this new journey. And your grandmother can be prepared you make kind of blood control, you go to the doctor, you make kind of research what can happen, you prepare, you ask the company who is organizing the trip if they have a doctor on board and this and that. So whatever you can do, you do, and of course you don't risk her life or whatever. You decide what is the risk and if she wants to do it or not. All the things that I say now are just an example of how we could change the reality of our characters and give something back to them with the films that we make. So there are a lot of fears in this section when you are in the eye of the storm. You think everything can go wrong. These are all different fears. For example, the main thing is that you give she has to give up control because her own life, her real life is not there anymore. So she moves to some place without control. She surrenders herself and all her weapons. Her weapons are her resilience and her ability to fight and to talk. And suddenly you realize that she can speak very good English, which you didn't know because you never talked to her. But when she was younger, she maybe studied in somewhere. So she moves, and then there comes the moment in your dramaturgy. We call it here the all is lost, where you are with her in the plane and something happens and she feels very bad and you think, fuck, I lost it, she's getting a heart attack or whatever. But it's just a moment. Because there is doctor, nothing happens, she maybe drank not enough, she's dehydrated and so on. And so she gets some medicine and is there, and she finds new friends in that group, other old men and women who are also going to Cuba, and suddenly she's not alone anymore. She finds new friends there, and she sits with some other women maybe, and they talk about how handsome Che Guevara was at that time, and that Fidel Castro is ugly now, but it would not be bad to meet him maybe also. They had a crush on Che Guevara, but Fidel Castro is also not so bad. So they get out there, they get support. They are a group. They became. Your grandmother is not alone anymore. She became active. She reaches Cuba on a wheelchair, but who cares? And it's great. She gets sun. She gets great Cuban food. She smokes a cigar. You never thought that your grandmother can smoke a cigar because she was always saying bad things to you when you smoked a cigarette next to her. So suddenly you find out the whole activistic part of your grandmother, how she was when she was younger, and you come much more closer to the character of your grandmother and your person, and you make a much more true film about your grandmother, although you changed her life with your idea, because if you didn't make the film, this would never happen. And it's a moment of truth, it's a rebirth of your grandmother. She doesn't manage to meet Fidel, but she can take a picture in front of a big painting of Che Guevara on the wall, and she posts this. Maybe you create a Facebook account for her. So suddenly she returns to the perfect world, and now she sees the world for what it is through her experience. The others are changed. The whole family is taking her serious. They talk to her. They are interested in the journey. They are interested in her. They are interested in her past. And she's rewarded spiritual and internal. And she has new ways of coping with the situation that she's alone. So she goes more out. She goes to meet more people and so on. This was a stupid example maybe of how documentaries can change the life of people and how you can use fictional dramaturgical models to reconstruct or to restructure your stories. And it doesn't have to be such an extreme example that you take someone and bring her to Cuba, but it can also be the whole material that you have. You can reconstruct it and look at it and look at these models. They are all in the internet, the heroes model and so on, and reconstruct your material in a way that is dramaturgically interesting, and yeah, and go for it, make great films, don't be afraid of reality, whatever reality you will be faced. Thank you very much, I hope it was useful. You have questions, you can ask them. No questions? Then have a good lunch. Thanks for coming. Bye.